So the paradigm, to put it in simple context, is a multitude of habit, and it exclusively controls almost all of our behavior. So our behavior, 95 to 98% of it is habitual. So what I mean by habitual is we're doing it on autopilot. We don't even need to think about it. Like when you learn to drive a car and before you know it, when you have them moments where it's like you were up the road and then before you know it, you're about 2 miles down, you didn't even remember how you got there. That's the best way I can explain how our subconscious works in terms of our habitual behavior. We're doing it on autopilot. Most of the time we don't really have a clue what we're doing on a conscious level because it is habitual. But as we become consciously aware, of course, we start to shift that. So the paradigm itself controls our perceptions, opinions, and beliefs, as well as our actions through our habitual behavior. And in a sense, the paradigm boxes us in. So I believe it's one of the things that is fundamentally important for us to be aware of if we truly want to be a conscious being in this world. So how does it work? So thinking of the mind, energy comes in through our conscious mind. So we take in everything through our conscious mind. Now this comes in through our senses. So our senses are what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, and what we smell. So just to reiterate that again, so when we are working with the paradigm and understanding it, energy is coming in through our conscious mind, through our senses. So our senses are hearing, tasting, seeing, touching, and smelling. And so we're taking in information constantly through the day. And even when we're sleeping, through our senses and through our conscious mind, we have the ability to accept or reject ideas. So as information comes in through the external world from our senses, we can make that decision whether we accept it or we reject it. Now, why I believe, just going back to what I said a second ago, it's so important for us to be aware of this part of us is because, if we're living unconsciously, which most of the global population is for their whole life, when we become conscious and we choose to start living consciously with this understanding, we become aware. We become aware of this information that's consistently around us. So your input can be things like the news, the books you're reading, the conversations you're having, podcasts, anything around you. Your environment's a huge one. The relationships, these are all in your external, and this is all part of your input and your outputs and what comes from you. And we'll go into that a bit later on. So becoming acutely aware of your input and understanding truly how significant each of these components are. So question for you today is, what are you allowing into your subconscious mind? What is it that you're allowing? Now, just to go back to what I was speaking about there in terms of you have that power to allow or reject what comes through the conscious mind. Now, once you allow, so once you accept an idea. Now, I'll take an example. We've all got somebody in our life who likes to communicate with us, maybe why they don't agree with what we're doing, whether that's a business idea or our study. We've all got somebody like that in our life. And so when they're talking to us, we have the opportunity to either accept or reject the information that they're taking in. Now, for everybody here, we can all think of an example where somebody close to us has had something to say. We've accepted it and then it stopped us from doing something. So that's a really, everyday example that all of us will have had to deal with at some point and probably will have to deal with it again. But what would happen if you learned how to reject it? If you created resilience so that you could reject that idea, how would that serve you differently? And so that's just one example of a whole list of inputs that we have exposure to on a day-to-day basis. So with this new knowing, ladies, and we're going to touch on this throughout the course because we really want you to get this, with this new knowing, isn't it worthwhile continuing to develop yourself as a conscious being? What would your life look like if you began to only give focus to what it is that you want? What would your life look like? What would it look like if you took time to release any pain and trauma as it surfaced, but continue to focus on just what you wanted to create? What would your life look like if you trained your mind, your subconscious, if you shifted your paradigm in a way that would serve you? What would that look like? And we all have that power.